Imagine this. You need to create an abstract painting. Option 1, unlimited colors and a month to finish. Option 2, just 2 colors and only 24 hours. Which one would you choose? And more importantly, which would actually produce your best work? So I read Never Play It Safe by photographer turned entrepreneur turned author Jarvis. And it mainly focuses on the idea that in order for us to live a fulfilling life, we need to take risks, and that staying away from those risks is actually the riskiest thing we can do. Now, the way Jarvis structured the book is by introducing 7 levers that should help us living our best life, namely attention, time, intuition, constraints, play, failure, and practice. And in my opinion, each chapter focusing on one of these levers is jam-packed with valuable information, and you should definitely read the book. The links are in the description below. But what resonated most with my current self is lever number 4, constraints. The world places limits on us, but it's the limits and constraints we apply to our own lives that give us a massive advantage when it comes to unlocking a bold and creative life. In many cases, you'll learn to leverage the very thing that's been holding you back. That's how Jarvis introduces constraints as a lever for a fulfilled life. He goes on to explain how constraints show itself in many different forms, but I was most drawn to the idea of external constraints like facing bad weather during a photo shoot, for example, or more serious things like getting cancer, as well as self-imposed creative constraints that can help you create better, more unique work faster. Because the idea here is that true creativity and innovation don't, emerge from unlimited freedom. They thrive within well-defined constraints. So as an example, he tells the story of when he was trying to come up with a cover design for his book Creative Calling, which came out in 2019, I believe, and he felt creatively stuck. After all, sitting in front of a literal blank page can be really daunting, right? I mean, you have endless options, and so somehow you feel overwhelmed and paralyzed. So then in conversation with legendary designer Stefan Sagmeister, he learned about the concept of lateral thinking, first introduced by doctor and author Edward de Bono. The idea here is to solve a creative problem by viewing and tackling it through the lens of something completely unrelated. In the case of his book cover, Sagmeister encouraged him to take a glass of water. A simple glass of water. And look how it could provide inspiration for the book. Like, and I quote directly here, what if the book cover were clear? What about reflections? Could that be part of the design maybe? What if there were some conceptual tie between the flow of water and the state of creative flow that so many artists seek? And as you probably expected, thinking in that way worked and did create a pretty unique book cover. Because when using something unrelated as inspiration and as a set of rules or constraints for your creative thought process, you not only tend to avoid so-called writer's block, but also avoid coming up with obvious ideas, copying literally everybody else. Alright, so regarding external constraints that you have no control over, Jarvis encourages to look at highly successful individuals who, for whatever reason, had to suffer a lot in life, but instead of succumbing to the challenges put upon them, use the circumstances as fuel to create a unique life. He writes a lot, for example, about famous Mexican artist Frida Kahlo, who suffered a horrible accident at the age of 18 that pretty much set her up for a life of physical pain and suffering. But it also kind of opened up the door for her incredible painting career as she tried to cope with her dire situation through art. Being alone and confined to her bed for months, she began to paint herself with a mirror mounted above her bed. And there's this famous quote of hers, "I paint myself because I am often alone and I'm the subject I know best." And eventually she became famous for exactly that, her self-portraits. Alright, so how do I try to implement the whole constraint concept in my everyday life? First, as I unfortunately suffer from a myriad of health issues, chronic disease that gets worse over time, I'm not able to do my primary job, photographing hotels and resorts, as well or as often as I used to. So I needed to come up with potential alternative income streams that are easier for me to generate given my poor health. And it obviously would be easy to only see the downsides here, but there's also this different point of view where looking for ways to make money that don't require me to travel all the time opened up avenues I definitely wouldn't have gone down otherwise, like trying out YouTube, for example. So in essence, it is seeing my human health constraints as a tool to be more creative, differentiate myself more from others maybe, and think more outside of the box, as the obvious path is often blocked by my health. And that of course can be a good thing in the first place, but it also helps me cope with my condition, as I can follow this narrative of, well, I cannot do that anymore, but instead I can look at this, and this also looks very interesting, right? Okay, and the second way I try to implement this concept is a bit more practical and straightforward, and follows the idea of the book cover we talked before, and self-imposing constraints. It is just that when I'm trying to get a creative task done, or really any task for that matter, and I'm somewhat stuck, I recently started to consciously put little constraints on myself. That could be photographing a project with only one lens, or with an iPhone only, or setting myself a limit of no more than an hour to write a script, or forcing myself to create a thumbnail with only one color, or going without a phone for a day, and so on. Or as a concrete example, recently I've been working on a design for a customizable mattress for a client of mine, and I tried to think through the lens of a car manufacturer, like how would this look like if it were a car? And indeed it brought up some interesting ideas. So in my personal experience, putting restrictions and constraints in place almost always yields better and more creative, and most of the time also faster results. You can kind of think of it like writing a thesis, For example, writing about the gold rush in the 19th century is really big, and it's a really broad topic, and you probably don't know where to begin and what the structure should look like and whatnot. But narrowing down, like writing about, for example, the role of women during the 19th century gold rush in California specifically, is a much more feasible project. So in conclusion, the main takeaway for me at least would be something along the lines of: constraints are vital, constraints are powerful. A life without them is not possible. And you should consider self-imposing creative constraints when you feel stuck trying to do something. And you should try to see external constraints that are put upon you by life, not only as a negative and hindering force, but also as a chance, as gateways to new endeavors. Because as always, the glass is half full and half empty at the same time. Alright, so if you want to read the book yourself, which I would highly recommend, you can find the link in the description below. This is an affiliate link, so buying the book through this link helps me make more videos like this. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed it, and as this is a brand new channel, obviously every like and every subscription is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much. And yeah, well, have a nice day. Bye bye.